Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Harmonious World. My name is Hilary Seabrook. For this episode I'm joined by guitarist Chris Allard, who I've spoken to before, and this time it's about his project called Melodic Collective. And it's a guitar-led quintet which has a new album out. The album includes pianist John Turville, trumpeter Robbie Robson, bass player Ollie Hayhurst, and Will Glazer on drums. What you're listening to now is Study in Thirds. I love this, and I hope you enjoy listening to my conversation with Chris. Welcome to the latest episode of Harmonious World, and I'm joined by Chris Allard, who is talking about his latest album, which is by Melodic Collective, and it's a very interesting, in a good way, collection of these supreme improvisers. So, Chris, tell me about Melodic Collective.
Oh, well, thank you, and it's lovely to be here, Hilary, and to speak with you again. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a really lovely group of like-minded friends. We've all played together a great deal in various different projects. It's got a really nice kind of cohesive vibe about it. It's just been so easy recording together because we didn't really have to say very much, which is always nice, you know.
Yeah.
And we talked about forming a kind of collaborative group, and I was able to, with this producer friend, Mike Trim, who has this fantastic studio. We talked about recording a new project. He also recorded the album we talked about last year, my duo album with Ross Stanley.
Oh, yeah.
Tortugas. And in fact, Mike and I are working on a couple of other projects too at the moment. But in any case, yeah, so Mike was up for recording and producing it. And so got the guys down. We had one rehearsal in London prior. I don't think more.
But you don't need to, I guess, with guys like this. I mean, these are big names in the British music world.
Such just amazing players, absolutely, as you say. Yeah, so it's just so easy playing with people like, you know, Robbie Robson, John Turville, Ollie Hayhurst, Will Glazer, you know. And there was quite a lot of the music that we've recorded here is pretty difficult and involved stuff, with quite a lot of specific written kind of sections and figures and odd time signatures and sort of changing sections, but also there's lots of open, really quite free improvised things too. And I think hopefully it's quite nicely balanced in that regard, and it works quite well.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you actually about the I'm always fascinated by the balance between composed and improvised, and how, because some people, in my experience of talking to people on this podcast, some people are very precious about the composed element. Well, you know, rightly, they've spent hours you know, working on it, but then they are completely free about the improvised bit. And I love that sort of dichotomy, if you like, between the two bits. So how did that work? You know, how much did you write? How much did the others contribute to the writing process? And then what happened?
Well, that is an excellent point. And I also, I'm really interested in that sort of boundary between the written and the improvised. Yeah, in the case of this project, we each, well, there are there's a tune by Robbie Robson, and there are several tunes of mine, and 2 tunes by Ollie Hayhurst, and a tune by John Turville. And it varies from tune to tune as to how much of it's improvised and how much is written. But there's one tune that just came to mind when you mentioned that, of mine, which ended up being called Driving Home, which actually started out as I was asked to write some music for a fantastic violinist friend, Kate Robinson's string quartet, because she was planning on recording a record of string quartet music that was written by jazz musicians who don't normally write for string quartet. So I wrote an initial sort of draft of this tune for string quartet, and it was really densely written with all kinds of complicated, difficult lines that kind of intersect, that I didn't anticipate ever having to play. So it's like the sort of thing that's really, really difficult on the guitar, because that violinists, the classical violinists, they could just kind of play anything.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So then I ended up that album. Unfortunately, it never happened in the end, but maybe it will one day. I hope so. But so I reworked it for this quintet, and it ended up being really hard to play for me on the guitar. But the other guys, somehow it came together in the end. But so that's very densely, very extremely specific in the lines between the guitar and the trumpet and the piano and the bass too, in places, and the rhythms on the drums too. And there's this ostinato thing that goes throughout it that's a bit Steve Reichy perhaps. But then there are sort of solo sections that are improvised for soloists on top of it too. But yeah, I mean, it really, that to answer that, it's very on a case by case basis, because some tunes are more are different, and there are improvised sections that work and fit with the written parts in different ways.
Yeah, it does sound like this is a proper collective. Sometimes people talk about a collective, but it's actually like one guy who's gone, here you go, but here's the written music, off you go. But this doesn't sound like that at all.
Right. Well, that's nice to hear, and I hope so. I mean, we've like I said, I mean, I brought it together, but the idea was to make it as collaborative as possible and to make it into a band, and so everyone's brought their tunes, and somehow it works really well and has that kind of band quality, and each of our different tunes seem to sit quite well, I think, side by side. So yeah, thank you.
Great. And this is proper, like, nothing. When I say nothing to do with COVID, I mean everything is to do with COVID. But this was all written and played, so rehearsed, recorded, mixed, everything. The end of last year, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, although the had talked about it, and there were preliminary talks about this prior to that, during the sort of the tail end of the kind of lockdown period. But yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. So it's actually really nice. One of the things that I'm enjoying now is being able to talk to people without the third question always being, so how was your lockdown?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm bored with that now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just sort of I'm just trying to block that out.
Yeah. I interviewed a guy yesterday actually in New York, and he had the temerity of saying what quite a lot of us have actually said, which is there was some good stuff that came out of lockdown, because although it stopped the world, the restart for some of us has been much more creative. I'm definitely more creative having had that break.
Oh, well, that's good to hear. Yeah, and I suppose so. I mean, it was as with many musicians, it was quite difficult, and stressful, but yeah, it's certainly a lot of creative stuff has come out of it for me specifically, and I know many others too. And some people, definitely a minority, are doing better now than they were before, but the vast majority are not.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I know that there are lots of people for
many
whom it was
struggling.
Yeah, it was and it was interesting because the day we're recording this morning there was a piece on the news about the actors going on strike in in LA. And I was thinking, it's about time the musicians went on strike again. We haven't been on strike for, 40 years or something. But actually, people during lockdown, music was one of the sources of comfort for so many people, and yet we haven't forgotten it, but a lot of people have forgotten that, and they've forgotten the comfort they got from watching live streams, from listening to new albums, listening to stuff that artists were doing from their own homes. And we need to put our hands in our pockets now, I think, and support musicians.
I couldn't agree more. Yes, I probably shouldn't get started really, but the financial support from the government was pitiful really for musicians, because on the face of it, the self-employed income support thing helped people out that were self-employed, but actually there were a number of loopholes that excluded a huge number of musicians, including me. Actually, I didn't get anything from that. And thankfully, because of my teaching at Guildhall and a couple of other places, I was able to still pay the bills throughout. But many people were not. No.
And I think, one of the other kind of positives about the teaching that continued, which, I was the same, that I had a regular teaching income that meant that I didn't have to worry so much. But that also meant that we were still teaching the musicians and the artists and the creatives who are now doing their stuff. So at least that, that was able to continue. What's next for Melodic Collective? Obviously, this album is just out the last few days.
Yeah. So basically there's quite a lot of radio play and stuff like that happening at the moment on Jazz FM with it, and there's some reviews that are promised over the next month or so. There's going to be a London album launch date, in the autumn.
Excellent.
Going to get together with the guys and try and bring that about, and hopefully some more.
Yeah. Well, let me know about that, especially because
absolutely,
I'd love to come and do a review of that.
That would be lovely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I wish you all the best with it, and I'm happy to help. I think my little contribution in terms of this podcast, and then it gets spread and people listen to it and people go, oh, I've never heard of Chris Allard, the guitarist. Now I have, so.
Well, thank you very much. We massively appreciate the publicity, and it's nice to speak to you.
Yeah, always a pleasure.
On the Perdido Records website, there's a listen now thing that I think it should. This is generated by Charlie Wood, fantastic American pianist, songwriter and singer, whose record label it is, and on there's a listen now thing that I think should take you directly to whatever streaming source whoever clicks on it uses. It's one of those things. And also there are an extremely limited number of physical CD copies that could be you could get directly through me.
I will point people at the various methods of contacting you and Perdido. And I think one of the best things is there are some record labels who are doing such great work at the moment, aren't there?
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's no shortage of great music available, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank goodness. Keeping us all a bit saner than we were.
Indeed.
Yeah, fantastic. Great to talk to you, Chris.
Thanks very much, Hilary.
Okay, stay in touch. I'll see you soon. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Harmonious World, and I hope you enjoyed listening to my conversation with Chris Allard. I saw him last year with Ross Stanley at the 606 Club, and that was a great gig. So I'm looking forward to the album launch for Melodic Collective. you're listening to now is the title track, Melodic Collective, from this album. Please do follow the links that are in the show notes. If you'd like to support this show, you can subscribe. And if you become a subscriber, you'll get a weekly email and a special monthly podcast episode that nobody else gets. And there are also some goodies coming up. So if you're a subscriber, watch out for your inbox. Your actual physical letterbox might just ping you something nice. But thank you for joining me once more for Harmonious World. Wherever you are in the world, let's make it all a little bit more harmonious. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of Harmonious World. My name is Hilary Seabrook, and it's a great delight to bring this series of discussions with musicians and composers and writers and all sorts of people to you. Obviously, there's no point in having a podcast if people aren't listening, and I'm very grateful to my listeners for doing so. Thanks also to Joe English for composing and performing this new theme tune. So wherever you get your podcast, you can leave a review. You can share this with your friends and family, either as a link or on social media and that sort of thing. I'd be really grateful for that. Don't forget that you can subscribe now. There's a link wherever you get your podcasts. So have a great week, and please remember why I started this, which is just to try and make the world a little more harmonious. Thanks for listening to Harmonious World.